A very good morning to all. In today's session, we are all going to learn what is all about research design, what would be the parameters that would be considered in designing the research process and how it would be fulfilled. That will be learned in today's session. So let's begin with the definition of the research design. So basically, research design is a blueprint of the whole study. It always represents the researchers that how they will collect the data, how they will analyze the data, and that's why it is a crucial process of any research project or report. It also called a framework. We can talk about a theoretical framework or a theoretical plan that can be applied practically by the researcher in the planning process and how they will implement the research studies. It also provides a structure, a basic structure that how the researcher would conduct the research, how they will collect and analyze the data, how they will conclude the results and the findings, and ultimately how they will circulate to the readers. So that's why it is a one of the critical part of the overall study because it always ensures the accuracy, the validity, and the reliability of the research data and how the research findings could be accurate, valid, and reliable for the readers and for the organizations as well. It also involves the outlining of the overall approach, the methods that a particular researcher will be used to collect and analyze the data so that they can able to answer all the types of research questions, whether the unscientific or the scientific, or to test the hypothesis. The hypotheses are almost declarative and assumptive statements that a particular researcher wants to include in a study to prove whether it would be a right or wrong. Automatically, when a particular researcher will design a well-designed research study, will always have a clear or well-defined research questions, objectives, and ultimately the objectives and the questions will be achieved when he or she will collect and analyze the data through using the different types of the methods that they will willing to use up in their studies and interpreting the findings and the results that will that a particular researcher get from the results from analyzing the results, and that the whole critical process or the critical review of the whole study is totally based on the research design only. So that is the overview of the research design. So let's begin with the next section that are the functions of the research design. So automatically the first function of the research design is to provide the structure. It always provides the structure that how the particular person or an individual will conduct the research study, because after all through the structure, through preparing the structure, the particular researchers need to follow that structure for collecting and analyzing the data. Next, you can see function of it is to ensure the accuracy and the validity of the research findings. So the one of the feature of the research design is to ensure that what will be the research findings that would be accurate and valid for the readers, because whatever the data has been collected by him or her, it always should always be relevant to the research questions and objectives. If it founds it irrelevant, the overall design would be goes wrong. Next one is research design minimize the errors. After all, research design is an overall structure, is an overall plan for conducting the research study. Then ultimately the main the main function is also to minimize the errors, if anything, found in collecting the data and analyzing the data. It also provides the guidelines that how a particular researcher will collect the data, analyze the data, and ultimately, which automatically or ultimately helps the researchers to avoid the errors that could affect the accuracy of the research results and the findings. Next one is to identify the research problems. Research design is the best tool that how a particular, you can say, individual could identify the research problems and the questions which are relevant to the research topic, which a particular individual has chosen to conduct a study on it. Ultimately, this research design is also provide a theoretical framework that how they will formulate the research questions and hypothesis, which ultimately belongs to the research topic, and of course, which is totally based on the research problems, that what would be the gaps exist in or her individual research studies. So that is also the one of the function to identify the research problem. Next one is the facilitate the replication. After all, it also helps that how the researchers and the individuals or the analysts would facilitate the replication of the research study. That means they can easily modify the research study, they can easily improve, and that could be done through the research design only, through applying a standardized approach so that a particular researcher can able to collect the data at their own ease and analyze the data as well, which automatically the other researcher could also use such studies in their own research study as well. So it could be repetitively used, the research studies, and it could be done through through implementing and preparing the, you can say, accurate research design. Next section would be is the goals of research design. So the first goal of the research design is identify the research problem. So automatically, once a particular individual have identified the gaps, the concern, the issues in a relevant area or a subject area, and accordingly they will conduct the research question so that they can give up the answers through collecting and analyzing the data. And while identifying the research problem, a particular individual has to review the existing studies called literature, to identify the gaps in the knowledge of the studies, of the new and the current, new and the existing studies or old studies, and formulating the research questions, because after all, the research questions and the research objectives, which ultimately based on your research topic and the gaps in the issues and the areas of particular issues that totally exist in the particular subject area. Next one is the next goal is developing a research plan. The second goal of the research design is to develop a research plan, that how a particular individual will select the research method, whether it could be the quantitative research, whether it could be the qualitative research, whether it could be the mixed form of researches. It could be or in other words, a combination of the quantitative and qualitative research. What would be the data collection technique, whether the particular researcher will opt a survey tool, will opt an interview tool, will opt an observation tool. It could be any tool or techniques, depends upon the research topic and the need of that tool, which totally applied and valid for collecting the data or not. So that is this is a way that this is a way that individual or researcher could develop a research plan, including the one of the element of collecting the data techniques, and that is also the one of the goal of the research design. And the next part of including in the research plan is that how the individual will analyze the data. It could analyze the data through the Excel, it could analyze the data through SPSS software or the Strata softwares and the Teclio softwares. It could be done that how it could be decisions is to be taken by the researcher only whichever is appropriate depending upon the needs. Next one is the ensure the reliability and the validity of the research findings. So the third goal of the research design is to ensure the reliability and the validity of the research findings. That whether whatever the researcher has been considered, has been prepared and implement the research design. Thus, does the research design is actually useful to validate and the reliable that particular research findings. So that is also very important to understand because it could be done by selecting the accurate or appropriate sampling methods, which would be the random and the non-random sampling. What would be the techniques used in data collection? What would be the methods to be used in data analysis? Whether it could be the descriptive statistics, whether it could be the inferior statistics. So the inferior is the advanced statistical tools, but when we talk about descriptive, it's all about tabulations, graphs. You can see the measures of the, you can say, central tendencies, dispersion. So automatically it is very important to understand that how such methods and techniques to be adopted, and it's totally based on the needs and relevant to the research topic or title. The next one is it provides a framework for data analysis as well, because the one of the goal of the research design is to prepare the research plan. So when we talk about prepare the research plan, the data analysis methods are also equally valent to include one of the goal, and that's the goal is provide a framework, provide a structure of or theoretical framework for the data analysis, that how an individual or researcher could analyze the data and what would be the process to analyze the data. And it could be done through the two ways or through two statistical method. It could be a descriptive statistics and the invariant statistics. So how it could be done, what technique, what methods of statistics to be used, that to be according to the needs of the research topic and according to the objectives of the study. So it totally depends on the objectives, it totally depends on the research questions and how it would analyze it. So that is also the one of the goal, or in other words, I could say an important goal of the research design. Next one is the ensure ethical research practices. The fifth goal of the research design is that it is always ensures ethical research practice, that what would be the research is conducted, it could be conducted in such a manner that that is actually the ethical, legal and socially responsible, that there could be the particular study will not adopt any non-ethical consideration or any such factors which actually harm the, you can see, the norms or the you can see themes of the people that which are actually responsible for it. So that's why it always ensures the ethical research practices, which is one of the goal, or you can say the fifth goal of the research design. In brief, research design must include these four main elements. The first one is a clear statement of the research problem. So whatever the area of issues and concerns involved in the particular research, definitely a particular individual or researcher has to make up or prepare a clear statement of the research problem. Next one is the procedures and techniques to be used of gathering the information. A particular individual has to include in the research design that what techniques, what methods, what will be the procedure to be used, and how they will collect the data or information that will be that will be used and analyzed in his or her own research study, which are very useful for the organizations as well as the readers. Next one is population is to be studied. So what would be the population, whether it would be the rural population, whether it would be the urban population or suburban population, that is also mean to be included in the research design. Next one is the methods is to be used in processing and analyzing the data. What could be the methods to be used in processing and analyzing? What was the statistical software tools to be used? How such tools will analyze? What would be the methods? Statistical methods and tools will be used in analyzing the data, and that leads to an ultimate results of the study, and through the result it could be interpretation based on the objectives, on the problems, and how it could be analyzed, how it could be interpreted, that results briefly. That is the most important part of the research design. So if any of the individual or researcher would include these four parameters and aspect in the research design, then definitely his or her research report and project will leads to an you can see that the particular direction of his or her research is going in a right way. Next one is the characteristics of the research design. The first one is neutrality. Neutrality always comes from the assumptions that how an individual or a researcher will set up his or her study. So automatically a neutral way is to be maintained, which is based on the pre-assumption beliefs and notions. So automatically the researcher expectations or beliefs does not portray the exact findings or interpretations of the study. Accordingly, a good research design is always portray the potential sources, the relevant sources of the errors or those factors which actually affects the findings of the study, or which portray an unbased or the neutral results which are actually irrelevant and beyond the expectations of the researcher, and that to be neglected as per the one of the most important characteristic of the research design, and that is neutrality. The neutral results will not be considered in any of the research study, and a good research design always avoids the neutrality results or the findings and the factors which actually affects the findings which yield an unbased and neutral result, that will be neglected. So next one is reliability. So the reliability is one of the characteristics of the research design which actually refers to a consistency in the measurements over the repeated measures. And of course, a favor random errors is to be occurred. So it is very important that repetitive measurements is to be done, a repetitive measures is to be applied so that the errors could be minimized as much as the researcher can do. So a reliable research design must always follow the results, whatever the results, whether it would be consistent, whether it could be applied for the new researches for the future use with a few errors which could be occurred due to the chances or due to the mistakes which has been done by the researcher or individuals. Next one is validity. So validity is always refers to to minimize the non-random errors, which is actually the errors involved in the measurements of the individuals, which are unlikely to occur. So automatically a good research design which always use up the measurement tools so that the errors could be minimized so that it will ensure the validity of the results. Next one is generalizability. So the outcome of the research design it always applicable to the larger population and the size, and it will not apply especially to a small samples, because generalized results could be come from the larger sample rather than the small samples, and the generalized methods which always refers to the study which will be conducted on any part of the population, whether it would be a large population, whether it would be the urban population of the country, whether it would be the suburban population of the country, which having a similar accuracy level, that ultimately applies this particular characteristics of the research design. Next one is flexibility. A research design should always allow whenever there is a changes is to be needed in the research plan as needed, a particular researcher or individual can do it. And it totally based on the collection of data and what would be the outcomes of the study would occur. And accordingly it will the changes could be made, and it could be made through having the good research design, or in the preparation and at the time of the implementation of research design, the flexibility is one of the characteristics which always exists. The particular researcher and individual can easily allow for the changes whenever it's needed. So this is one of the main characteristics of the research design. So these are the five main characteristics which follows in the real based applications as well, whenever the particular individual is planning or preparing any research design for any sort of research study. Now we can come up to the most important basic terms, that is variable, and how what are the two main types of the variable which are used in the follow up the main types of the research design. The first one is the what is variable. Variable could be any object, it could be any idea, feeling, symbols, any time period, any sort of category that a particular individual is trying to measure, that is called variable. Of trying to measure, it could be the height, it could be the, you can say, the satisfaction, it could be the experience, it could be the weight, it could be the height. So when we try to measure any feelings or idea, it's totally being measured on the based on the scores. So when the scores come out to measure it always in numerical way, so that's ultimately called variable. But the point is, variables are classified into two main categories, that is independent variable and dependent variables. So when we talk about independent variable, which is exactly sounds like it is an independent, it stands alone, it does not influence with any other factors, with any other variables the particular individual is trying to measure. So that's called independent variable. For example, if someone age might be an independent variables, the other factors which are related to the age, it does not influence that someone age, and that's called it is an independent variable. Like other factors like what they eat, how much they go to the school, how much they watch the serials or daily soaps on the television, it does not affect your age or someone age, and that's why the age factor or the age variable is an independent variable. So next we can talk about the dependent variable. As the name sounds, this is something which totally depends on the other variables or the other factors. For example, test scores. The test scores is totally dependent on your number of hours spent on your studies, and that's why the test score is a dependent variable. So automatically, if any factor or any variable is dependent on others variables, that becomes a dependent variable. So automatically test score could be a dependent variable because it could be changed depending upon the other factors, that how much the number of hours spent on your studies, how much you slept last night when you took up the test, even how much hungry when you took that test. So that is why the test code is a dependent variable, because automatically all these factors which automatically influenced the test scores. So that's why the test score is dependent variable. So this is how that you can say terms will be described with the help of the examples. So this is an example, a few more example to understand this concept relevant to the different disciplines or different areas of the specializations. The first one is education study. So amount of study time is an independent variable which automatically affects the test scores. So test score is a dependent variable. When we talk about the medical trial, so automatically a dosage, a high doses of a drug, which always affect the health of the, you can say, person, that always affect the patient recovery rates. So automatically the dosage of a drug is always an independent variable, because nobody can, you can say, affect the dosage of the drugs that to be given to the patient, but ultimately it affects the health of the patients. So automatically the patient recovery rates, it's a dependent variable. Next one is when we talk about any marketing area or the marketing research. So the type of advertisement affects the consumer buying behavior. So what is a dependent variable? What is a independent variable? So automatically the type of investment nobody would harm. So like even no other variable could harm the type of investment. That is a choice of of the particular researcher and individual. But ultimately, if we choose the type of investment, automatically it affects many factors, many variables like consumer purchasing behavior. So the type of advertisement is an independent variable which affects plenty of variables, which automatically stands for a dependent variable. So automatically consumer purchasing behavior, it totally depends upon the type of the advertisement. So the type of the advertisement is a independent variable, and the consumer purchasing behavior is a dependent variable. Let's talk about the another normal mathematics research, that is the exam scores are the dependent variable in the study, looking up the relationship between the study hours and the exam scores, because the exam scores or the test scores is totally dependent on the study hours, and that's why the study hours is an independent variable and the exams or test scores are the dependent variable. And this is how you can explain if any of the area of discipline would come up, or any example that you would like to explain following up the concepts of the dependent and independent variable. Now, we can come up with the most important topic, that is the different types of research design. We can come up to three main category: the research design in case of exploratory research study, the research design in case of descriptive and diagnostic research study, and the research design in case of experimental research design. So let's cover up all these types individually. So let's begin. What is exploratory research? Exploratory research is that type of research design which mainly used to investigate a problem which is not clearly defined. So if any of the problem which is not clearly defined, a particular researcher is exploring that problem in front of the readers, and that research is called exploratory research design or studies. It is always conducted to have a better understanding of the existing research problem. So if I'm talking about the poverty issue or concern. So automatically I will explore that poverty concern to make the readers a better understanding about this problem and how it could be resolved or what action is to be taken. That is called exploratory research. It does not provide any conclusive results at all. For such a research, researchers always begin with a basic idea, uses their own sources so that they can able to identify the issues. They can that issues can be used with the focus for the future research, or it could be used for a future use. Next one is an important aspect here is that the researcher is always willing to change or his or her direction. They can change the subject area. If something they can find some other new problem, they can always you try to study that new problem, identify the issues, and accordingly they can focus on the future research, and that is called the exploratory research. Sometimes exploratory research could be used in the preliminary stage, because during the preliminary stage, a particular researcher can easily identify the areas, the issues, the problems, and from following that problems, a research topic could be derived, and accordingly it will be used for the future research. And that's why it is called exploratory research study and design. And that's why it is totally based on the grounded theory approach, the roots of the problems that to be interpretative, that could be studied well by the researcher, and accordingly that rooted research, that grounded theories which will approach will be used to answer the questions like what, why, and how the research has been conducted. So these are the basically the methods or the tools which is used under exploratory research, design or studies, the primary research and the secondary research. You can look up on the left side the primary research. We can conduct surveys and polls. If you look up on the YouTube channels and there is an advertisement come up in the form of the questions, they ask the question with the multiple choices. You can just take that is called that is also that is called a survey. So the public survey, that any response is to be given by the thousands of viewers and the lakhs of viewers that automatically recorded for the research, and such type of tool, that is survey or poll, will be termed as the primary research. Interviews and one-to-one discussion on a specific topic. Focus group refers to a small group of persons who are actually having a discussion on a specific topic, that is called a focus groups. Observations, through observation the data and information has to be collected by the individual, that is called an observation. Secondary research, we have three main methods and tools. The first one is online research. You can do a research online. You can identify the problems through searching online. That is called an online research. Literature research, you can have a plenty of existing articles relevant to your topic is available online, that you can search it out and study accordingly and mention in your research studies on your new research studies. Next one is case study research. You can take up any case of real life based, and you can start researching on that, and accordingly you can conclude the case in the form of the question, the form of the multiple questions and the answers to be given. That's called the case study researches. So automatically whatever the research is to be done, it's through either primary or the secondary sources, and that could comes under the exploratory research, being as a methods of such research design. The design in such studies is always fixed, it not flexible, because exploratory design is whenever any design has been prepared, it is fixed. You cannot change during the process of the project or report, and the focus attention must be on the following terms. It's how formulate the objectives of the study, how design, what would be the methods to be used for the data collection, how you would select the data sample, how much the material will be needed in making up the questionnaires and collect the data from the respondents and the participants, how the data is to be collected, what would be the time period required to collect the required data, and where the required data can be found. That is also the important task of such exploratory research design, how it will process and analyze the data, and then how the particular researcher report or reporting or circulating the findings to the organizations or the readers. That is also the one of the biggest attention or the focus area on exploratory research design when a particular individual or a researcher is planning and implementing or using such type of the research design. So this is a focus area that an individual has to study well. Next, these are the example of exploratory research design. We can take up a case of Apple product development. The background is they are conducting exploratory research. They are just identifying the problems, and it could be done through the focus group, a small group of person who are persons who are specialized in their field. So automatically the problems, it's the key issues and problems will come up. They can listen their opinion insight from the potential users before they launching up any new product or features. So this is how the exploratory research design is to be followed, just to listen, take a feedbacks from the users, and accordingly they will plan to launch a new products or features. Apple assembles a small group of potential users, then they have a moderate discussions, participants involved more and more, they discuss their thoughts, their ideas, their preferences, their concern about the design of the product, that is a prototype, and the conceptual framework, that how it could be prepared, how it could be, you can say, design the product. Findings, and automatically findings could be a valuable feedbacks about, they will get to know the preferences and choices, and it could be done through the focus group discussion. So it is, this is a way that Apple company, that before launching any new product, they always keep up always take up a valuable feedbacks from the users, and they invite the users who are very expertise and have a formal discussion, and accordingly they will get to know all the insights, all the opinions, and accordingly they will design. And the design would be the desired features like health tracking. You can see in the new models of Apples, you can have an apps of the health tracking, customizations app. You can interact with the new customers through the artificial intelligence, having a formal discussion or the communication with them to get to know all the insights. So this is how the Apple product development process would goes on according to the using of the exploratory research or design through the focus group. The next one is descriptive research design. Descriptive design is a method to describe the characteristics of the problem. You just describe what is the research subject, rather than focus why the research subject has been focused. So it focusing on describing the nature of the demographic segment without following up the question why this demographic segment has been chosen. So that's become a descriptive research design. Descriptive research design have a methods. The first one is observational method. This is the most effective method in descriptive. You just observe and just give a description of what you have saw in the nature of the class environment, in the nature of the students in the classroom. That is why the observation method is to be used. To conduct, researchers make use of two main observation, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative observation is mainly focused on the numbers and values. They rather than they always associate with the number of quantities, number of values, figures, facts. So the results is always come out from the descriptive and statistical analysis methods like mean, measures, mode, standard deviation, mean deviation, and so on. For example, the researcher can track if the current customers will refer the brand. So it always use the net promoter score quotient. So if any of the researcher wants to track the references of the brands of the customers, then automatically they don't calculate the references. The references cannot be calculated numerically. Through measuring the references, a numerical tool will be used, and that's called a net promoter score quotient tool. It's all about rating, about that which brand you will prefer the most. It could be a list of numbering 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that, they will score to the brand. Next one is qualitative observation does not involve any measurements or numbers. We just monitoring the characteristics of the population. Let's we talk about the healthy environment of the organization, that how the natural calamities will affect the life of the people. So this is how we can talk about the qualitative observation. When you watch on a TV, any tsunami incidents or any tsunami event would come up in a country. So automatically, when you see the TV, it's all the observations that you see on the TV and researches has been done, which cannot be measured. So you just looking up qualitatively, you just imagine the perceptions of the people, the pain of the people. That's called qualitative observation. Next one is case study method. Case studies always involves in-depth research, how the study of individuals and groups to be done. It always leads to the hypothesis and assumptive statements, and accordingly, a particular or specific scope of studying a phenomenon is important. So case study should not be used to determine what would be the cause and effect relationship, and neither they can make any accurate predictions. So it totally depends upon the cases of the real life scenarios, and accordingly they can prepare it well. So it could be definitely, and a disadvantage would be there, the errors and the basis or neutrality. It always occurs on the researcher part. Next one is survey research. In the survey research, respondents always answers the survey, the questionnaires, the polls. As you can look up on the YouTube channels, when any of the channels who have a maximum lack of viewers, a survey tools is always come up. A survey poll is always come up on the advertisements or during the advertisements of any of the songs coming up, or a new song, or in advance, then questionnaires and polls is being used. So it is a popular market research tool to collect the feedback from the respondents. So if you look up the Big Boss 18, who will won the show, who will win the show that time when the particular finales come up. So automatically there is a survey poll, a list of the candidates, and a particular viewers will answer who will win the show. So automatically, what is called? It is called a popular market research tool in the form of polls. So this is a very appropriate tool when a particular researcher is making up a right survey questions, and the questions would be the open-ended or a closed-ended questions. So survey can be conducted in any form of mode. It could be online, it could be offline as well. It depends on the needs of the researcher. Next one is the example of descriptive research. So a specialty food crop group launching a new range of barbecue rubs, which like to understand which flavors of rub are favored by different people. So this is all about a qualitative observations, that how how the flavors of rose are favored, are preferred by different people. It's all about to measure the preferences of the different people. So that is why it is a qualitative observation rather than it cannot be measured numerically. It is always measured on the score based questions. So this type of study is always helps the organization to develop any accurate or simplistic business model and amplify the marketing tools or marketing tactics in the core markets. Next one is diagnostic research design. It's mainly applied to the medical specialization or the medical science. So diagnostic research attempts to identify, to examine and analyze the problem, which is used to determine their causes, like in terms of having any detect any diseases early, prevent illness, and personalize the treatments. So it is always better to diagnose your anything any part of the body in advance so that a particular personalized treatments or illness is could be prevented. So diagnostic research design is the overall plan that how a particular researcher or individual will conduct a diagnostic research. And it always includes the methods that will be used to collect and analyze the data. So automatically, if I'm suffering from viral fevers, automatically the data has to be collected to taking of a blood sample. And the result, what are the findings and results to become up, whether it would be low or it would be high, as a infection is more or low, that to become out as a result. What is that called? It is called diagnostic research design. Methodologies in diagnostic research, that is a survey. So the particular participant has to ask their experiences, their opinions, their behavior. Interviews, when any of the in-depth interviews will be conducted with the participants about to get to know their experiences, opinions, and deep knowledge insight in the particular area. Focus group to identify, it is also a good way to collect data, both quantitative and qualitative data about a problem. And it is a way to interact with the new people and new researchers within a group setting area. Observational studies, it is also the good way to collect the data about to get to know about the behavior, to understand the attribute or characteristics of the individuals or groups. Case studies are also a good way to collect the data about a specific problem or issues, and it is always used to conduct or to examine the following: the factors that contribute the problem, the effects of a problem, and the effectiveness of a solution, whether the solution is actually applicable, and if the solution has been applied, whether the particular people will able to have any positive or significant impact of the solution or not. That is the way that how the case studies to be conducted, to be examined based on these three main parameters. Example that have a COVID-19, there are two types of examples, two types of diagnostic design has been used: a quantitative diagnostic design and a qualitative diagnostic design. If we talk about the quantitative diagnostic design, is based on the numbers, figures, statistical analysis, where a quantitative diagnostic test for COVID-19 would involve measuring the amount of virus genetic material in the patient sample and compare it to a threshold value to determine whether the result is positive or negative. So this is called a quantitative diagnostic design, where we just measuring the amount of the virus genetic which are involved in the particular patient sample and compare to one of the refer value to determine that whether this result is positive or negative. You can see in the blood sugar also there is a biological references has been given, a measurements has been given, and the result has been given in the black or in normal, which always occurs in the references level. That is why it is same applied in the measuring the amount of the virus genetic into the COVID-19 situation. Next one is qualitative diagnostic design, where it measures or includes non-numerical data and values like observation. We can use the methods like observation, interviews, and subjective assessment so that we can identify a specific disease or conditions. Let's look up the same examples to be used. COVID-19 example in qualitative diagnostic design, the researcher observes the patients. If any doctor talk about the patient, about the COVID-19 symptoms, then automatically we are talking about the qualitative diagnostic design where no statistical, no numerical measures has been done. We just looking up the symptoms. If the symptoms come up and shown into a patient health condition, then automatically it's through observation, through examine, then automatically termed as the qualitative diagnostic design. So any of the studies which is conducted through the scoring system, that a scores has been given to the symptoms of the COVID-19, that is actually called the qualitative diagnostic design, that hard to determine whether the person is likely to be infected by the virus or not. So it could be examined through the symptoms, patient's symptoms of the COVID-19. So this is how the diagnostic design has to be followed up if any new disease has been occurred in the country. Next type is experimental research design. So experimental research design is actually one of the type of the scientific investigation where one and more independent variables are changed, applied to one or more dependent variables, and they can look up how much the effect you can say about independent variable, how much the effect of independent variable on the dependent variables. So this is when we have a look up this, you can say the relation of the dependent or the independent variables through the scientific investigation, and that's called the experimental research design. And through this research design, the effect of independent variables on the dependent variables can be easily observed and recorded over time to time, which always helps the researcher to reach out a possible conclusion and try to find out the correlation between these two types of variables. And this approach is one of the most valuable approach when it applied to any of the specializations like physical and social science, psychology, education, etc. Because it all such experimental research design is always used to compare the two or more groups, whether it could be independent groups, dependent groups, or any of the controlled groups. So that is very challenging to implement this design. Experimental design is mainly design belongs to the following main points. Time is one of the critical aspects because it is a very time consuming and expensive design method, which always used to establish a cause and effect relationship. Cause and effect behavior, this has always been consistent. We need to consistently find out the cause and effect relationship and cause and effect behavior between two or more groups or between among the two, applying the two or more dependent or independent variables. So that's why it is a very challenging to implement this particular experimental research design. If anyone wants to or you want to comprehend the significance of, you need to find out the importance of these two variables about cause and effect relationship between two variables or more variables between two or more groups, then ultimately experimental research design is to be applied, because it is if anyone having a scientific investigation is to be done, then definitely this design will be applied or adopted. This is the classification of the experimental research design is being classified into four main categories along with their statistical tools. If we talk about the pre-experimental, so automatically it is a one-shot case studies to be done, that pre-test and post-test is to be done in one group. Pre-test is about all about the testing of the patient. Post-test is means before post-test is to be done, they will give a treatment to the patient, and after giving the treatment again the test has been done. So pre-test and post-test is one of the variable tool and the pre-experimental research design. Then when I having a fever, then automatically I will go for the pre-testing to have a test to check whether I am suffering which type of fever, whether it would be the viral normal viral fever, whether it could be COVID fever, something like that. So once we get to know during the pre-test that the pre-test sample has been taken to get to know about the fever, then after getting the which type of fever I'm suffering, like COVID fever or the viral fever, a treatment has been given for a 7 days. So after the 7 days, again the test has been done, and that test are called post-test. So pre-test is always used to identify the disease. So once you get to know about your disease, a treatment, you can say a treatment has to be given. You can say a personalized treatment, and once you will get the treatment after a couple of days of the treatment, then again the testing, sample testing is to be done, and that sample testing is called post test. So this is how the experimental through it, as I told you, it is a scientific investigation. Each and every case will be done through scientifically testing. So that's why it is one of the key static group. Group testing is to be done. To experimental, the pre-test and the post-test control group. Control group means when you have the pre-test and the treatment is given, the post-test, and after getting the post-test results, it becomes a controlled group, that you are fit and fine, your disease is being controlled now, and that group, the after having a disease and you have recovered from the disease of any of the group of persons who are recovered, that group is called controlled group. Pre-test, only the control group will be considered. Solomon 4 group, there are four main groups. As again, the testing process goes on pre treatment and post test. This is how the two experimental. This is the cases of the COVID-19. And then again, the pre-test is to be done. Then treatment has been given. Then again, the testing shows post-testing is being used, and again the results are same. So that is not a control, that is uncontrolled situation, uncontrolled group. If that after the post-test testing results are positive, that's become the control group. Using how the statistical test is to be used, it's all about the time series, because as I told, the pre and post testing process, there is a couple of time period is to be used. And after pre-test, get to know the fever, treatment, personalized treatment is given for the 7 days. It's a time series. So statistical tools will be used as a time series and the multiple time series, which is a statistical tools analysis to measure such experimental and designs and how it will be used. Quasi experimental is a randomized block, Latin square method, factorial design. These are the called statistical tools when quasi-experimental called a partial design, the half version of the pre-experimental, half version of the true experimental. It is a neutral design or a combination of both. And what would be the statistical tools will be used, a randomized blocks to be made among the group of the people, seven each blocks to be made, or four each blocks to be made, which involves seven persons each. and accordingly the testing process goes on through scientifically. Latent square method statistics and how it will measure the quasi experimental design, how the factorial design will be used, the factor analysis, each and every factor will be analyzed statistically through that quantitative way, and that's become the quasi experimental research design. So this is the way that how it will be classified of experimental design into three main categories, that is a pre-experimental, true experimental, and the quasi-experimental. And the statistical analysis and tools will be used to measure these designs or measure these data which has been collected using these particular classification, and that would be the time series, multiple time series, latent square, randomized log, factorial design analysis. And this is how it will be used after collecting the data and analyzing the data statistically. And that is this is the way that how the designs is to be used according to the situations and the conditions as well, and and accordingly the statistical methods will be used and advanced statistical methods, and depending upon the dependent on more dependent variables. So if it depends, it will be applied in two or more groups are available, and it could such designs are applied when two or more dependent or independent variables are available and it has been used in the research study, then definitely an experimental research design will be used, and it could be done through real scientific a careful scientific examination or investigation of a particular research study. So that's why it is a very challenging and the critical way to implement, because after all, everything, the resources, the time and energy, the manpower is equally important because it is a physical testing process of the group of the people in the real based situations. And that's why it's called experimental research design. That's it for today. So this is all about the research design which has been explained in the today's session. So thank you so much for listening this lecture. I believe it is a very useful lecture, and for the sake of your knowledge, to gain more and more knowledge after listening this lecture. Till time, thank you and namaste to all.